The Tennessee Titans general manager search has begun. I'm going to tell you who's requested for interviews and who the best candidates available are on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Tennessee Titans general manager search has officially begun. They started requesting interviews. I'm going to tell you who those interviews are with, which candidates are the best candidates. I'll talk about my favorite candidates from around the NFL, and we'll talk about some candidates who could get some interest from the Titans, but I don't think they would be interested in the Tennessee Titans, to flip that around. So we're going to get into all the general manager information that you need to know on today's show. Before I dive into it, do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. And speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one, especially this time of year. There's going to be a ton of news, going to be a ton of breaking news. Things are changing every day, and I keep you up to date and as informed as a Tennessee Titans fan could be here on the Locked On Titans podcast. This is the kind of episodes that I really, really like because I get to share information with you guys, get to educate you on some of the options that the Titans have here, and then let you make your decisions on what you hope to see. Now, like I said, the Tennessee Titans began the interview process. They started requesting interviews with people around the NFL. We have 6 interview requests that have gone out so far on Wednesday. There could be more on Wednesday night. Again, around this time of year, guys, I live in fear of recording the show because new news happens all the time. But of course, I'll always keep you up to date no matter what. As you saw yesterday, we do bonus episodes here on the Locked On Titans podcast when the news calls for it. But 6 general manager interview requests were placed. Number 1, Mike Borgonzi from Kansas City. This is going to be one of the biggest names on the market. Now, one thing that we got to take into account here is there are only two general manager spots open in the NFL right now, the New York Jets and then the Tennessee Titans. So keep that into account where some of these people like Mike Borgonzi, in my opinion, a heavy hitter from the Kansas City Chiefs organization. He's currently the Kansas City Chiefs assistant general manager. He spent 16 years with Kansas City. He's been a scout. He's been a director of player personnel. He's been the director of football operations. He is one of the most well-regarded and well-respected general manager candidates in the NFL. What I would tell you is, based on the Tennessee Titans general manager role now, where you think general manager, you think they're at the top of the food chain. Well, you know with the Titans now that Chad Brinker is actually at the top of the food chain. So would a Mike Borgonzi want to come to Tennessee when he's expecting to be the top dog, and you're not getting that with the Tennessee job? I would tell you no, that Mike Borgonzi would not be interested in the Titans job, but with only the Jets and the Titans having opportunities this offseason, things are limited, and maybe Borgonzi wants to take one more step up the ladder, officially be a general manager for a couple of years before he goes to be the Chad Brinker of another organization. That's a problem in and of itself that we'll talk about at the end of the show. But an interview request with Mike Borgonzi shows that the Titans are on the right path. He is absolutely one of the most qualified, most talented options available. So that was the first request that we got word of on Wednesday morning, and it made me feel very happy that the Tennessee Titans were at least thinking in the right realm of what kind of person we want in this spot. Ian Cunningham from the Chicago Bears. Well, I'll talk about Ian in just a second. He wasn't one of the interview guys, but I got a little overexcited there about Ian Cunningham. We'll talk about him. But the next interview that I want to talk about is Terrence Gray from the Buffalo Bills. One of the top names on my board is Terrence Gray. Him and Borgonzi are at the top of the top. I don't think Borgonzi is going to actually interview or is going to actually take the Titans job. I think it's a practice interview. Again, he wants to be Chad Brinker for a team, not Chad Brinker's lapdog. So I don't think it's going to be Mike Borgonzi, but a guy like Terrence Gray makes a ton of sense coming out of Buffalo. He's currently their director of pro personnel, and he is considered an expert in college scouting. That is really where he has been impressive. He was an 11-year scout for the Minnesota Vikings. So Terrence Gray is a guy. Look, we heard the job description from the Titans yesterday when Chad Brinker made his statement. They're looking for someone who could set the draft board, someone with expertise in projecting college players to the NFL. They want a glorified head college scout for their general manager spot is really what the Titans are looking for, with Chad Brinker being the actual general manager. And I think Terrence Gray makes a ton of sense in that realm, because if you look at what the Titans are looking for there, Gray as a college scouting expert would be a perfect fit. And he's a guy who he's a director of player personnel. He'll want to take that step. The Titans are really offering an assistant GM spot is what I would call it. And Terrence Gray, that would be a step up for him, where for Mike Borgonzi, it would not be a step up. Another interview with a guy that I'm very interested in is John Spytek, the assistant general manager from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Spytek worked his way up from director of player personnel. He was a college and pro scout in Philadelphia for 5 years, a director of college scouting in Cleveland for 4 years, a national scout for the Denver Broncos for a few years, worked his way up from director of pro personnel to assistant general manager with Tampa Bay. Right now, that's where he's at. I think John Spytek makes a ton of sense. Again, a focus on college scouting and an experienced guy who's been around the block. Is he ever going to get the opportunity to be a general manager with Jason Licht on the scene in Tampa Bay? It's doubtful. So you become the general manager for the Titans, which again is more of an assistant general manager role, but you get a little bit more responsibility, and then maybe you turn that into your opportunity to be the Chad Brinker for another organization. This all is very confusing with the way the Titans have their front office set up here, and I'm going to talk about the downfalls of that setup at the end of the show. But again, you got to think about people who this move to Titans general manager would actually be a promotion for. Because you look at a guy like Mike Borgonzi, who is the assistant general manager in Kansas City, and you look at a guy like John Spytek, who's the assistant general manager in Tampa Bay, and would the Titans general manager job, which is really more of an assistant general manager job, would that really be a promotion for them? Is that really a step up for them in the corporate ladder? Like, they're already behind the guy who makes the shot, who calls the shots, and they're going to be behind the guy who calls the shots in Chad Brinker in Tennessee. So that's part of my skepticism here with some of this. But Spytek would be an excellent hire. The last couple of ones here I want to go through quickly. We have Catherine Hickman from Cleveland. Catherine Hickman is the assistant general manager for the Browns. She cut her teeth in the Canadian Football League. She was the vice president of football operations for the Eagles. In 2022, moved into vice president of football operations for the Browns before getting the assistant general manager role. Doesn't have quite as much of a college scouting background, more operational stuff as some of the other options I've mentioned or will mention. So good to pick the brain of an analytically forward organization in Cleveland with Catherine Hickman, but I want that pure scouting background. And like some of these names that we're going to talk about don't necessarily fit that exactly. Ed Dodds, the assistant general manager from the Indianapolis Colts. He was a scout, a national scout for the Seahawks. Has been with the Colts since 2018 and rose up the ranks. I don't know that I'm too interested in Dodds as a guy that you're taking from a division rival. There's that scouting experience there. But I don't know if he would want to come over and be the general manager for the Titans when he's the assistant general manager for the Colts. It feels like a lateral move for a division rival, and I don't know if that makes sense. And then finally, a name that you guys all might recognize, Reggie McKenzie got an interview request for the Tennessee Titans. He was the former general manager for the Oakland Raiders for 6 or 7 years. He's currently the senior personnel executive for the Miami Dolphins. Reggie McKenzie is 60 years old. So very, very experienced, but does a 60-year-old former NFL general manager want to come be Chad Brinker's Robin? I'm doubting that, but good to pick the brain. Again, You do these interviews. You don't always hire these people, but to get Reggie McKenzie's experienced view of the Tennessee Titans, to get Catherine Hickman's analytically viewed of the Tennessee Titans, analytical view of the Titans. I think that's important. So those are the 6 general manager candidates the Titans have requested interviews for so far. Now we're going to get into some guys who haven't gotten an interview request from the Titans, but who I'm very, very interested in as candidates. Before we get into it, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year, and I got those tickets off Game Time. Now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets for an upcoming event, and I was using the Game Time app, and the Game Time Picks feature allowed me to find amazing deals. It allowed me to find a view from my seat, literally a panoramic view from my seat. And of course, the app has all-in pricing and shows the total cost for tickets up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about the interviews that the Tennessee Titans have requested already. Again, these people could decline the interview request, but the Titans have requested interviews with 6 general manager candidates: Mike Borgonzi out of Kansas City, Terrence Gray out of Buffalo, John Spytek out of Tampa Bay, Catherine Hickman out of Cleveland, Ed Dodds out of Indianapolis, and Reggie McKenzie out of Miami. Again, my top options are the top 3 that we talked about. Mike Borgonzi, but I don't think he'll accept the job because it's not a good enough job for him. Terrence Gray from Buffalo, college scouting expert, really excited about that opportunity. And John Spytek, the assistant general manager from Tampa Bay. Would he take the job? I don't know, but he is a strong candidate for the Tennessee Titans. But there are a lot of candidates out there that I think make a ton of sense for the Titans that haven't gotten interview requests yet. It might happen by the time that you hear this. We'll probably see more interview requests later on this week and into next week as well. But here are the names that I really, really like that haven't quite got that request yet from the Titans. We are going to start with what might be my number 1 candidate above them all. I think that my number 1 candidate is probably Mike Borgonzi. But again, I don't think that Mike Borgonzi is coming to Tennessee. So it almost feels unnecessary to continue to talk about Borgonzi. I don't think that that's a good fit, but I would take him immediately, but I don't think it's a realistic fit. So my number 1 realistic fit for the Titans is John Eric Sullivan. John Eric Sullivan is from the Green Bay Packers. So clearly Chad Brinker and John Eric Sullivan have worked together. They worked together for 10 years in Green Bay, and Green Bay has one of the best front office setups, one of the best, most well-ran organizations in the NFL for its entire history. Sullivan is a guy who, like Chad Brinker, incredibly versatile. Right now, he is the vice president of player personnel, I believe is the title that he has, but he is a football lifer. John Eric Sullivan's dad is a wide receiver coach for NFL players. He was a wide receiver coach. Now he's a private coach, but he works with Justin Jefferson. Now that's a throw-in piece of information. Back to John Eric Sullivan, though. Incredible evaluator. He was the first guy to tell Brian Gutekunst about Jordan Love. He's the one who found Jordan Love for the Green Bay Packers organization and was the first person to identify him. He's worked in scouting. He's done cap management. He's focused on the draft and free agency. He's been heavily involved with coaching searches. He is one of the people who was most involved in hiring Matt LaFleur from the Tennessee Titans to the Green Bay Packers. So John Eric Sullivan, football lifer, loves football, a hard worker, great talent evaluator from college to the pros, a specialization in scouting and cap management, worked in the draft. He's worked in free agency. He's worked in coaching searches. This is a guy who shows the versatility of a Chad Brinker. He's got the relationship with Chad Brinker. He comes from a good winning organization, and he's not an assistant general manager. He's a vice president of player personnel. So this would be a promotion for him. I think John Eric Sullivan from Green Bay is my favorite option for the Tennessee Titans. Another guy who I jumped the gun on a little bit in the first segment is Ian Cunningham, the assistant general manager for the Chicago Bears. We talked about Ian Cunningham 2 years ago when the Titans hired Ran Carthon. Ian Cunningham was my favorite general manager candidate. I had him above Ran Carthon in my personal rankings of who I wanted. Ian Cunningham is a guy with great scouting experience. The question becomes, again, he's already the assistant general manager for the Chicago Bears, and the Titans general manager position is essentially an assistant general manager to Chad Brinker. So would Ian Cunningham leave Ryan Poles in Chicago if it was a lateral move? I don't think that he would, but Ian Cunningham probably should have gotten the job over Ran Carthon last time. So the Titans could make amends there and admit that they made a mistake with Ian Cunningham. He is overqualified for the position. Another guy who I really like is Glenn Cook from Cleveland. That's the next guy that I want to mention here. Glenn Cook is another guy who the Tennessee Titans interviewed when they eventually hired Ran Carthon 2 years ago. Now, it was initially reported early in the day by someone named Stainbrook that the Titans had requested an interview with Cleveland's Glenn Cook. That ended up being a misreport. That is not the case. The Titans haven't requested an interview with Glenn Cook yet. Will they? I don't know, but Glenn Cook would be an excellent, excellent option. He's the assistant general manager and vice president of player personnel for the Cleveland Browns. He was a former scout for the Green Bay Packers. He was a college scout and a pro scout. He's really good with the operational aspect of the front office, hiring, firing, working the waiver wire, understanding free agency, dealing with free agent visits, think about coaching hires and stuff like all the operational things that come with a general manager job that are outside of just, I drafted this player, I signed this player, I made this trade, I set the roster. There's so much to do outside of that. And Glenn Cook has been heavily involved in that in Cleveland. He is a well-rounded, like we talked about with John Eric Sullivan, a versatile guy who's been involved in all of the different aspects of being a general manager, not just the college stuff, not just the pro stuff, but the cap, the hiring and firing of coaches, draft, free agency, scouting, the whole 9 yards. I want somebody with good versatility in there. I think that would make a ton of sense that also has that specialization in college scouting. And Glenn Cook doesn't quite fit that perfectly, but has had enough experience in the scouting department that I think he would be a good option. And he's an analytically minded guy coming from an analytically minded franchise in Cleveland. And obviously we know Chad Brinker is really into the data and stuff. So I think that would be a pretty good fit right there. So for me, my favorite candidates, Mike Borgonzi, John Eric Sullivan, John Spytek, Glenn Cook, Ian Cunningham. Those are Terrence Gray, of course. So Terrence Gray, John Eric Sullivan, Mike Borgonzi, Ian Cunningham, and Glenn Cook. Those are my top 5 favorite options. One more that I want to mention here. Trey Brown is the senior personnel executive for the Cincinnati Bengals. Could be an option as well. I mean, there's already enough connections with Cincinnati. That's another small town, not small town, but well, for NFL standards, I guess. But that's another mom and pop shop franchise where the Titans are a mom and pop franchise. That's how the Browns and Katie Blackburn run the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's not, Trey Brown could be great, but I think I'd like to bring somebody from a more corporate structure of a franchise like Green Bay or, like Kansas City, more than the mom and pop shop structure that we see in Cincinnati and that we've seen most of the time in Tennessee. But there are some other general manager options for the Titans that I just don't think fit. And I think the reality of the Titans general manager job that we've been talking about throughout the episode is why some of these names just don't fit, even if some of the top candidates to discuss on the market. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays. They got the money lines, the over-unders, the spreads, the player props, and so much more. Visit the website today at FanDuel.com, or again, download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to join today, and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. A good informational episode of Locked On Titans here, going over the GM candidates on the market. I went over the ones the Titans have already requested an interview with, went over my favorites that haven't necessarily got the request yet, and my favorites in general. Now I want to go over some of my least favorite options for general manager, and it's not necessarily because they aren't qualified or because they won't do a good job. It's just because I don't think they fit the role that the Titans have created with general manager, and there's a problem that this general manager role creates just in its nature that I think could be an issue for the Tennessee Titans. But diving back into the names here, these are some names that you guys will probably recognize. Thomas Dimitroff. Thomas Dimitroff was the former Atlanta Falcons general manager, 6 playoff appearances, a Super Bowl appearance for the Atlanta Falcons as well. Another guy, John Dorsey, who's currently a senior personnel executive for Detroit, but he was Kansas City's general manager for 5 years. He was Cleveland's general manager for multiple years. Ray Farmer, he is currently with the Los Angeles Rams as a personnel executive, but he was the general manager for the Browns for 2 years. Louis Riddick from ESPN is another guy that a lot of people throw out there. Will McClay, who's basically the general manager for the Dallas Cowboys and has been for quite some time. Those are all names that are going to be mentioned in the hiring cycle. 100% those names are going to be mentioned, but let me just go through this. Ray Agnew from the Detroit Lions, their assistant general manager, another guy. But look, Ray Agnew is 57 years old. Does Ray Agnew want to leave being the assistant general manager under Brad Holmes in Detroit to come basically be the assistant general manager under Chad Brinker? Why would he do that? As a guy who's at 57 years old, it's not like he is desperately trying to climb the corporate ladder right now. You know what I mean? It's not like one of these young, early 40s, mid 40s guys who are like, I'm going to be a general manager in the NFL. Like, I just don't think that that makes a lot of sense. It's why I didn't like the Reggie McKenzie interview either. I get wanting to pick his brain. He's 60. He's got a ton of experience. I'm cool with that, but he's 61 years old. I don't know that that's the type of person who wants to be Chad Brinker's puppy. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. Same thing. Do you think Thomas Dimitroff, who led a franchise to a Super Bowl appearance, is going to want to take orders from Chad Brinker, who's never done a dang thing in his life that he can point to as an NFL executive leading the team? Chad Brinker is a very decorated human being, very intelligent human being, and has accomplished a lot. But from Thomas Dimitroff's standpoint, why would I take orders from you? Why would I answer to you? I led a team to a Super Bowl. What have you done? So why in the world would Thomas Dimitroff, with all his experience, come to be Chad Brinker's lapdog? Does not make any sense. Same thing with John Dorsey and Ray Farmer. We're talking about two guys who have been general managers who are older gentlemen. They're past 50. They don't want to be Chad Brinker's understudy. That doesn't make any sense. They're guys who the only way that they would leave their post right now is to be Chad Brinker for a team. That's the thing. Thomas Dimitroff wants to be the Chad Brinker for a team, not be under Chad Brinker. So why would these older general managers who have general manager experience in the NFL come and listen to Chad Brinker? Why would they do that? Doesn't make sense. That's how I feel about Louis Riddick. Louis Riddick wants to be the top dog in an organization. Why would he leave ESPN to be under Chad Brinker? It's not going to happen. It doesn't make sense. Will McClay is a guy who he's been with Dallas for a long time. He's 58 years old. He's basically their general manager. His official title is vice president of player personnel. Would he want to come? The only reason that he would leave from being that position with the Dallas Cowboys is if he was getting additional responsibilities and additional titles. Like, you're not getting that. That's a lateral move. He is for Dallas right now what the Titans are trying to hire. It wouldn't be a promotion, even though he's the general manager. The roles and responsibilities, as have been described by Chad Brinker and the Titans, would mean he's still an assistant general manager underneath the Joneses. It's just Chad Brinker is the guy above him instead of Jerry Jones and Jerry Jones' son, Steven. Why, if you've been with the Cowboys for 18 years, why would you do that? It just doesn't make logical sense. So those are names that you're going to hear about. Those are names that deserve to be brought up when we're talking about general managers in the NFL, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And therein lies the problem, is the way that they have set up the organizational structure here, with Chad Brinker being the president of football operations, who is functionally the general manager for the team as we know it. That means that your general manager position is really an assistant general manager position, which means people who do want to be real general managers are never going to want it because there's someone above them. And the only people that are going to be qualified and that are going to be interested are going to be people who aren't even at the assistant general manager level. It's directors of player personnel and vice presidents of player personnel and director of college scouting and director of pro scouting. Like, those are the type of players. The third rung down, GM, assistant GM, and then those type of guys are who you're going to be looking at. And those people, if you bring them on as essentially an assistant general manager to Chad Brinker, eventually they're going to want to be Chad Brinkers. So like when you have a defensive head coach, if you have a good offense, your offensive coordinator is going to get poached, and then you got to replace him. If you're Chad Brinker, you're basically a defensive head coach. Because if you get a good general manager, eventually they're going to want to leave and be the real general manager for somewhere else. So this style, while bringing clarity to the Titans' organizational structure, also creates a talent issue where you have to continuously replace the talent and continuously ruin the cohesion and the collectiveness of the scouting department. It just, there's a downside to that too. Chad Brinker just needs to be the general manager. The Tennessee Titans are looking for a head of college scouting right now, not a real general manager. So them trying to play with the titles here, not only that, but it's making people mad in the NFL because there are rules and laws and bylaws and things in the CBA that prevent teams from stealing other candidates in the front office unless they're getting a promotion. And calling this general manager spot a promotion over an assistant general manager spot somewhere else when the roles are exactly the same and there's somebody above you, that makes the NFL mad because the Titans are basically cheating the rules. And they're already in hot water because of it. So this general manager, I say in air quotes, role, not only does it create a talent issue where you have to constantly replace your talent, but it also creates an issue where the NFL is mad at you and thinks that you're trying to cheat the rules. So, I'm a bit frustrated by the setup. Of course, if the Titans do it correctly and get wins out of it, then nobody will care. But I see the unintended consequences of doing it this way for the Titans in terms of how it limits the candidates that will be interested, in terms of how it creates a void in talent that has to be replaced too often, and also how it can upset the rest of the owners around the NFL and the NFL in general at the Titans. So with all that being said, that is a comprehensive breakdown of the top general manager candidates who got interviews, my favorites, and names that probably won't be interested for one reason or another. But that's going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.